Hello everyone! In this video I'll be giving you 15 advanced tips to help you in your playthrough through Grounded. So tip number 1, use the photo mode for scouting. Photo mode can be an absolute game changer. Use it to scout ahead or to get an aerial view to locate resources that you potentially may have missed. Additionally, by surveying from a high vantage point, you can spot potential hostile creatures and choose safer paths or prepare for combat based on your goals. Additionally, photo mode allows you to peek around corners to check for enemies and even explore cave layouts to understand the map better without exposing yourself to immediate danger. Alright, now tip number 2, harvesting gum efficiently. Now there's a teeny tiny little spoiler here, and the timestamp for the second half of the tip, where there is no spoiler, is on screen now. Alright, and with that said, let's talk about the tip. Gum is a crucial resource for crafting smoothies with extended effects and for plugging the haze canister, which will remove the toxic gas from the area, making a safer place to explore and altering other parts of the map. Now normally a black ant shovel is used to harvest the gum with a few swings. However, sometimes the gum is located in hard to reach places, requiring you to build up to access it. However, you can also use a sticky bomb to explode the gum from a distance, though this does require good aim. And alternatively, bomb arrows can actually be fired directly at the gum, which will cause it to crumble and fall immediately. Although it does cost quite a bit more resources to make the bomb arrows, it is something worth noting if you don't want to build up to every single piece of gum, especially in the late game. Tip number 3, building for exploring. Building is not just for bases in Grounded, it is a vital tool for exploration. If you see a location you want to reach, you can likely build your way there. For example, near the haze or near the pond where the pitchwhacker is located, there are small little crevices that you would never be able to find if you did not build to explore. That's it, you need to build. Additionally, when you get creative with your building, this will allow you to discover new routes and just make more progress in the game in general, as some areas are completely inaccessible without building, as well as certain hidden resources. Now another method outside of building, it just involves using skill and creativity to navigate by jumping across things. You do a lot of parkour. You can jump across blades of grass and work your way up to higher positions that you may not thought possible if you just think about it. And a great way to do this would be to use the photo mode tip that I mentioned to you earlier. Alright, tip number 4, attack animation canceling. Blocking will reset your attack animation, which will allow for faster combos. So go through and execute your combo, which typically is a 3-hit combo, and then immediately press the block button, and then go through and start your combo again, and this will allow you to execute it much faster, and this is extremely noticeable with heavier weapons. Or another example would be, for instance, after you fire a crossbow, go through an attack animation cancel, and then immediately switch to a melee weapon, and this will give you minimal downtime by executing this cancel on the animation. Now you can't do this with bows, you can, but what will happen is if you go through and you do this with your crossbow, it's actually going to result in the second any additional arrow you use after this cancellation to actually deal less damage, so it's not very effective with the crossbow, but it's certainly effective when switching weapons or when going through and just trying to chain together combos. Now this is also great when harvesting resources like clay. Cancel a shovel animation by blocking as soon as it hits the clay, and this will significantly speed up the process for harvesting this material. This method can be applied to all harvestable items, making resource collection just much more efficient in general. Alright, and speaking of clay, that brings me over to tip number 5. Ensure you are using the rock cracker mutation. So the rock cracker mutation significantly reduces the number of hits required to break rocks and clay. Now it doesn't specifically say that, but you'll notice in the clip here, in the original piece of clay that I tried to break, even while using the attack animation cancel, it still takes me quite a bit of time, and it takes me 4 hits in general to break it. And then once I go through and I equip the mutation, it actually only takes me 2 hits to break the second piece of clay. So ensure that whenever you are harvesting, you go through and experiment with mutations, because it can actually save you quite a bit of time. Now tip number 6, exploit enemy weaknesses. Now I know a lot of people might think this is not an advanced tip, but just hear me out and then let me know what you think afterwards. So understanding enemy weaknesses is crucial for effective combat, as well as for progression. So there are 2 types of weaknesses in the game. There is the weapon type, which is going to be, for example, slashing and stabbing, and then there is a flavor type, for example, salty and spicy. Now some weapons will have built-in flavors and will already come with a specific type of weapon and flavor damage, and you can't really do much there. However, another example would be an antlion greatsword, where they go through and just have a slashing damage, but they do not have a flavor, which will give you the option to go through and experiment with things and decide what you want to put on that specific weapon. So for example, using this antlion greatsword, I know that it deals slashing damage, and if I'm going into the sandbox area, I know that antlions themselves are weak to slashing damage and assault damage. Well, there's not any specific weapon that I noticed that had slashing damage and salt damage. So by taking the antlion greatsword that already has slashing damage on it, and then putting salt damage on it as well, when you go through and you fight these antlions, you're going to do significantly more damage than what you would with any other weapon, especially the moment that you upgrade it. As well as the fact that certain weapons actually have hidden perks they don't tell you about. So the antlion greatsword, when it hits level 6, is actually going to get another perk that causes the third hit in the combo to deal an additional 10% more damage. So basically you've doubled up on weaknesses and you get a 10% more damage on the third hit as well. And you'll notice when I go through and I fight this antlion with this greatsword, I literally kill it in 7 hits in just under 5 seconds by exploiting its weakness. So a great mode of progression for the sandbox specifically would be come here, kill the antlions with other weapons you have available to be able to build yourself the antlion greatsword. And then go through, and if you can kill some of these antlions that are here in the pits, a lot of them actually have little salt crumbles underneath, and you can use that to then add salt to this weapon, which will make killing them easier in the future. Now, you're going to want to go through and kill these guys more often in the future because there's going to be treasure, which is going to be located in this area, which brings me to tip number 7, digging for candy. So you're going to want to go through and use the black ant shovel to dig up treasure, and this is probably one of the most reliable ways, especially in late game, to obtain those flavors of candy for all of those weapon upgrades. So that's why, for example, if you build the antlion greatsword and you're here and you're constantly dealing with them as you're farming these items every 1 to 2 days, you'll be able to go through and acquire other materials for different types of weapons, like spicy weapons, for example, all because you have the ability to deal with these enemies in a relatively easy way. Now, speaking of different types of weapons, let's talk about some of the things that they do outside of just dealing damage. So tip number 8, we're going to talk about spicy and salty weapons being used for food. Spicy weapons will actually cook food creatures upon defeat, while salty weapons will turn them into jerky. For example, when I defeat this weevil with a spicy weapon, it will yield a cooked weevil roast, and then when I use a salty weapon on an aphid, it will result in jerky. This method provides a ready-to-eat food without needing additional cooking steps, making a convenient way to stock up on food during your adventures and not having to prepare as many things in your inventory. Now, tip number 9, discoverable locations. There are 108 discoverable sites and wonders in the yard. Now, there's a specific mutation called the Natural Explorer mutation. In order to discover this and unlock the higher tiers of it, level 1 is going to require that you find 20 landmarks, level 2 is going to require 50, and level 3 is going to require 80. Also, if you can combine this mutation with the aphid slippers, it's going to enhance your speed and your jumping ability, making exploration and parkour just that much easier. This speed boot is completely invaluable when navigating the yard and attempting challenging jumps and parkour, and I promise you, the moment that you unlock this max level mutation and you put the slippers on, you will never ever leave your base and venture out in the yard again without having this equipped. And the only time you will ever take it off is if you're in a boss fight or you just feel like you need something else more important for a specific scenario. This specific mutation is game changing, and I promise you, you want this ASAP. All right, tip number 10, quick swap trinkets. Go through and place the trinkets that you want to use on your hotbar, and this will allow you to actually go through and equip them and swap between them without ever having to go into your actual inventory. This is extremely useful for switching between exploration and combat trinkets, or simply just changing from a trinket that boosts bow damage to one that enhances melee damage. Quick swapping in general is going to allow you to adapt to different situations seamlessly and just maximize your efficiency and your effectiveness and make it a lot less likely that you're going to be unprepared for a specific scenario. All right, tip number 11, gardening for resources. So growing specific resources in your garden will ensure a steady supply if you're struggling to collect them or you're tired of waiting for respawns. For example, if you want to go through and grow some mushrooms because you need more building materials for a stronger base, to simply speed up the growth or the amount that you have available to you, go through and place them in the garden. Then to actually speed up the growing process, use rotten food or rotten meat as fertilizer. And this strategy, by having multiple gardens, will allow you to constantly be adding more and more to your resource pool without necessarily having to go out and collect that resource every single time. Now, tip number 12, perfect pairing. Now, this I think is a tip in pretty much every single tip video, but it should be in every single tip video. And that's because the majority of the attacks in the game can be perfectly parried. And honestly, parrying in this game does not require a great amount of skill. There's a very large timer that you have to parry attacks. Some are much easier to parry than others, though. For example, the antlion is extremely easy to parry. And for example, when they throw the black ants at you, that is a random attack that you can actually parry. So instead of having to run away or have this body deal a great amount of damage to you, You can go through and just attack them with a bow from a distance and parry this body as it gets thrown at you, or you can run up and get in their face and attack them and not give them a chance to actually throw that body. There is just different options, different ways to approach these scenarios, but you just need to know that perfect parrying is always an absolute thing that you should practice, especially if you're planning to go through and take down some of the game's bosses. Tip number 13, save your flavored candy for upgrades. Flavored candies are rare and should be reserved for weapon upgrades rather than for consumption. However, there are two specific ones there are a small exception to. Eating spicy candy is actually going to grant you the spicy safety mutation, which is actually going to reduce slashing and stabbing damage, and the community in general says it also helps with explosion damage. I have personally not tested this, so take that with a grain of salt, but it definitely would be worth experimenting with. Also, if you go through and eat your mints, you will unlock the fresh defense mutation, which will provide 75% reduction against gas and burning damage, and help you in general survive the sizzle. This will be particularly useful when exploring the barbecue area or the sandbox. Alright, tip number 14, buffs. So you can actually go through and stack the effect of one food item and one smoothie to boost your stats before significant events like boss fights or just even challenging explorations. However, you cannot stack 2 foods or 2 smoothies. Just ensure you are constantly combining these buffs to maximize your character's performance, and they'll provide a strategic advantage in those difficult situations. And lastly, tip number 15. Grinders are completely underutilized, and at first when I was using them, I thought the only great thing they were used for was to make slurries to go through and get a couple of pets. But in reality, you can actually use grinders to turn full stems into fiber, which is going to provide 8 fiber per stem, which is going to be the most efficient way to actually gather fiber. Now, on top of this, you can actually pair this with a sap collector to ensure you always have a full stock of bandages, which will be essential for maintaining health during your tough encounters. Now, this strategy will guarantee a consistent supply of essential resources and enhance your survival and combat readiness. Now, in this clip, you saw me holding them. You could just have them on a pallet nearby as well, whatever works for you. Alright, and that concludes all 15 tips for this video. Now, I hope you learned something today. Please let me know down in the comments if you did find something out that you did not know previously. And consider leaving a like if you enjoyed the video, and subscribing if you're not already.